My father, he wore this watch on his wrist up until the day he died.
My daughter, she grabs it off the table. She goes, I watched that watch. And I was like, no.
When you're wearing that timepiece, you're wearing the history of that company.
I couldn't afford the Rolex as a 16-year-old in high school, but I could afford a G-Shock.
The folks in the community that want drama, there is no drama.
Bikes or watches?
Watches. Damn it. You guys flagged me the other day in the chat because I posted a picture and I had the wrong date.
Oh, I do that all the time, yo.
I want to reduce the friction in my life so I can increase my efficiency.
Welcome to another episode of On Time, a collector's journey brought to you by the MIA Watch Club. Today, I have a very, very special guest. Not only is he an incredible watch collector, he's a car and bike guy, and most importantly, he's a coffee guy. But at heart, he's a creative who, since the day I met him, has taught me a whole lot about this coffee business, creativity, and this thing we call Miami, our beautiful city. So give it up for our guest of the day, Matt McKenna. What's up, baby?
Thank you so much, Lex.
How are
Good to
you,
be
bro?
here.
I'm excited to have you on the show. Let me tell you, it's not every day I get to have a celebrity on my show. I get to have a living legend in the city of Miami. How's everything going, man?
Oh man, it's a grind, man. But grateful for another day in this thing.
We are here to talk about watches, and we always start with what was the first watch?
Oh man, jeez, and you gotta ask the hard questions right out of the gate, huh?
You gotta start. You gotta start right there.
Well, this story goes back to when I was about 11 or 12 years old. I think my father came home from Boston with this Omega that you'll show a close-up of later, but it's a beautiful watch, right? And I think he spent like $1,500 on it or something, and I was blown away, And this was like, I was like, man, he bought a $1,500 watch, It's like, man, he drove an Audi, he kind of had it figured out, And so I was an Omega guy, One of my first watches was a moon watch, I was a big Omega collector up until about 5 years ago when AP started working with us and Patek started working with us for our coffee, and now they're a big part of my collection.
So going back to that first watch, right? And you have it here, which is I think one of the most beautiful things about watches is this thing you get to pass on, right? And we've all fallen in love with these design pieces or these pieces of art through either seeing it on television, right? I think for me, my love for watches started looking at music videos and seeing hip hop and being kind of this aspirational, wanting to be like Master P. Remember the gold toilet? Oh, yeah. He got the gold toilet. Yeah. But this particular watch, how did it come to end up in your hand after?
My father, he liked things, and this watch was one of those things he really liked. You know what I mean? Like, he wore this watch on his wrist up until the day he died, And I remember about a week before he passed, he wasn't wearing the watch anymore, and I had it, but he wanted to know I had the watch. Is the watch okay? Yeah, the watch. Is the watch good? I'm like, I got the watch, Dad. And so he passed, and I sent it off, and I had it all refinished and serviced. I wish I didn't actually now that that I think of it, but yeah, man, this watch. He knew where this watch was all the time. You know what I mean? It was like super important to him.
Do you have a watch in your collection that you feel you wanted to be the watch that your kids end up holding on to?
Yeah, probably my 16202 Jumbo, that special watch from AP, that's a keeper, that'll be passed down for sure.
Are your kids into watches yet? Or?
Actually, my daughter just turned 16 years old, and I bought her a Cartier tank for her birthday.
Oh, nice.
So she's into watches now,
Yeah, introduce my daughter. So shout out to the guys at the Swatch Group. They sent me something called a flick flag. So I didn't know about flick flags, but flick flags are like watches for kids. And they're like intended so that they can learn from a young age how to love watches. So, we put it on her. And so every time that she sees my watch, she goes, I watch that, I watch. And the other day, we were in the closet, and she's in that 3-year-old age where she just loves touching everything. I had one of my watches that I was about to put on my FP Journe, and she grabs it off the table. She goes, I watch that, I watch. And I was like, whoof. No. Thankfully, no. I had put my hand and I was able to grab it. But it was in that moment I realized, okay, these things. I gotta watch how I keep them around
Oh,
my
my
daughter.
God.
But I watched that. It became the phrase of the house. Let's take it back to Omega. So you get your dad's watch. What then catches your eye from the brand? What was the first Omega you bought for
You know,
yourself?
like any good collector, I dive into the legacy of the brand, right? I start reading about Omega and about how they were, you know, innovative in space travel and creating watches for astronauts and creating watches for divers and these types of things. And I just, you know, I love everything it kind of represented, right? When you're wearing that timepiece, you're wearing the history of that company. And if you don't align with their values or the direction that company was moving in, it's not so special anymore, right? And I think the other thing too is like I know how much money that was to my father at the time. You know, that was a lot of money in the 80s. You know, now all relative. It's you know, it's like
you start spending a little bit more, and
Yeah.
before you know it, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, it's all relative. $100,000 later.
You're desensitized to it a
Yeah.
little bit. You know,
That's the thing I always tell collectors about, you know, getting into the watch world is don't worry about the price. And that doesn't mean like go try to buy something that you don't have. It's like, don't worry about having to try to show off, right? I'm wearing a beautiful G-Shock today.
yeah.
BBC collaboration. And this was actually, G-Shocks were actually the first watch that I got into. I grew up in hip hop, and Pharrell and Kanye had these iced out, and they had all the models, and I wanted to have them all. And so I couldn't afford, you know, the Rolex at the 16-year-old in high school, but I could afford a G-Shock.
So the coolest G-Shock I had when I first started DJing in the mid '90s is they had a beat counter. Look it up. You can tap a button on the watch and it'll tell you the BPM of a song. So cool.
So I want to talk about that, right? Because we're going to get into this incredible gift you just gave me. Maddie Love, baby. This is the EP. So tell me about your music career and tell me about where it started and what watch were you wearing it when you were in the club? Because I know you were in the club
I think
shaking
I
it,
was
dog.
probably wearing a G-Shock, actually.
You know what I mean?
The true story is a couple of friends of mine decided to hop in the car in the Ford Mustang and drive to Florida. And we drove to Florida. We kind of ran away from home a little bit. I think I was like 17 years old. And we ended up going to some club, more like a rave in Orlando. And this guy, Doc Martin, was DJing. And I had Doc Martens on. And I was like, oh, shit, that's Doc Martin. You know what I mean? I didn't know. And I was just hooked, man. He was rocking the crowd at this place. And I was like, damn, you know, I want to do this. And I went back to Boston. I sort of engulfed myself in the scene and bought a turntable, bought a mixer. I couldn't afford 2 turntables, so I'd mix, you know, 1 turntable into a tape deck, and I'd keep doing that over and over again. And little by little, I met people in the industry. I found the beeper at a party of a big DJ in Boston. That sort of opened doors for me. But yeah, music's always been in my blood. Last record I put out was in 2001. And I took a little break,
It's a little one.
you know, and started DJing again a couple of years ago. I've played all over the world the last couple of years and produced some music again, man. So that's my first record, 25 years.
So is there a watch that you have in your collection right now that you say, like, when I think about not Matt, but Maddie Love, that's the watch that embodies who I am?
This 15550 AP Royal Oak is kind of there.
Yeah.
Kind of there.
That's the one.
I feel pretty good.
When you put that on,
I feel pretty good when I wear that
The
watch.
swag goes up.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a really interesting dial color too, and it's just, there's a lot of history there too. I mean, I guess I like integrated bracelets. I just realized.
I could tell. A little late to the realization, but everything you brought today is an integrated bracelet. But honestly, there's a beauty to it, right? There's a beauty to that flawless look of the watch when the bracelet is integrated, when you kind of have to live with it, love it or hate it. And that's kind of the part of it that I think is great.
Well, I think that's the beautiful thing about the Gerald Genta design watch is that he was a jewelry maker, right? You know, that really is a bracelet.
Yeah.
That is a watch. And I think that the integrated bracelet really feels like more like a piece of jewelry.
I agree. Now, going back to utility, because you were talking about the G-Shock and you talked about Omega's history, right? It's crazy to think that today, you know, watches are more of a luxurious add-on than a utility. But when you look back to collecting, were you looking for utility, or were you looking for design, or were you looking for complication? Mostly
Early
time
days,
only.
it was like imposter syndrome. You know, it was like I wanted to be like Tony Soprano, you know, and have the gold presidential. But you know, I was at the UFC fight last night, and I was looking around the room, and all these guys got pretty baller watches on. But I think they just all have those watches because they're supposed to have those watches. They don't really know about those watches.
Yeah.
Like you and I, like we dive into stuff. Like I go to the Patek Museum in Geneva and I walk around and I look at everything. I'm really interested.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think some of these guys know their ass from their elbow. They just know they're supposed to have that watch, right?
But it's just become a luxury item. It's become something that and I think historically, probably we all start there because we see it in someone and we're like, man, like if I had that gold Rollie, or if I had that Jacob & Co. I remember when Jacob was popping and he had the 5 time stones and every artist had it. But as you go into the hobby more and more, I really, for me, I look for design. I look for the aesthetic. I look for the feeling of it. I look for the kind of the story behind it as well. But it's really crazy to think about the utility. Like very little do people set their watches, and you can't blame anybody. Like I'm a fault of that. Sometimes I get home and I'm like, I'm running out and I don't get a chance to set the watch to what I want it to be. Do you set every watch every morning?
You know what? You guys
like,
flagged me the other day in the chat because I posted a picture and I had the wrong date.
Oh, I do that all the time, yo.
And I honestly, that was the first time. I always set my shit.
Yeah.
But I tell you, like, it takes a minute to set. It's got pushers. You got to get the
I ain't
moon
doing all
face
that.
right. I mean, it's 15 minutes, you know.
I listen. Perpetual calendars are my favorite complication, and I'm not sitting there that long, which is why I love the new AP because it's all done in the crown.
Quick date,
And I think that's amazing. So when you think about technology and where it's moved on, right? Like when you think about what the Apple Watch did for wearing a watch and how technology has now evolved, do you feel that you're still an analog person, or you are still looking into what's next and diving into?
You know, I'm not wearing any of those wearables. You know, I bought the rings. I bought the whoops. I don't have an Apple Watch. I won't do it. I like to be very analog when it comes to my watch. I still have all my analog music equipment and, 909s and Jupiter 6s, but, unfortunately, we're forced into this digital generation now. I got in my friend's new Turbo S, and it's all digital. There's not even a gauge anymore. I need to have a gauge, man. I got to have something tactical.
Listen, I'm a big lover of Porsche, and I think what's going on with the usage of technology is obviously skyrocketing the prices on the vintage Porsches, but it's also losing a bit of the soul of the company. I think they make incredible electric cars. My wife drives a Macan Turbo, and it's an incredible car. Don't get me wrong. It drives incredible. It turns on, turns off by itself. Like, from a utility point of view, you're like, oh. Yeah. But from a spirit and a soul is missing some of that. And that brings me up to my next question. When you're hunting for watches, are you an online kind of guy, or are you kind of still calling the contacts, going and visualizing and touching the watches?
I think a little bit of both. I mean, this Land Rover that I'm wearing right now, they announced it like a year ago. It took me a year to get this watch. And, the whole story about this watch is really about exploring and about land, right? It's about getting out there. They filed like 16 patents, so it can reduce the friction and increase the efficiency of the watch. And I was thinking about, man, that's kind of what life's about, right? Like I want to reduce the friction of my life so I can increase my efficiency, right? Think about that for a minute.
Wow.
It's kind of cool what that stands for. Oh. I'm definitely going into boutiques. I'm looking at watches. I'm reading magazines. I'm watching your podcasts. I think it all goes together. But it's interesting what sort of comes through the shadows and what really makes it into your possession. Right, because there's a lot of noise. And
what's the crazy thing is, once I got into the hobby seriously, I started to understand how many watches there is. Like, I am neighbors with Adam Golden, and I get to go to Adam's office and see packages every 12.
I'm also neighbors with Adam Golden.
Yeah, you know that. We spend our time there, and man, like these companies, just kind of like about everything. They produce so much of everything that sometimes it's a little hard to like pinpoint something. And one of the things that I've taught my team and Hurley, who's our production guy here, is like, go try on the watch. And it's for me why I have a hard time shopping for watches online. Because I saw a watch the other day I thought was beautiful, but I was scared to pull the trigger because I'm like, if I put it on and I don't like it, now I got to put it back up for sale. I feel like having to go and still go to the vintage shows and still find that watch. I'm going to Watches and Wonders tomorrow, and I'm excited to like see the novelties firsthand. So I'll be sending you pictures because we addicts on that. So we talked about the AP. We know that that's the Maddie love. Okay. Every time I'm going to think of that watch, I'm going to play one of your songs. Now, talk to me about this beautiful integrated bracelet Patek.
So I like things that you don't see. You know, I don't want to follow trends. I want to sort of help create them, you know, in my own mind, right? So I love this watch because it's so underrated, that Neptune. You know, it's got the same movement as Nautilus, right? Perpetual calendar, integrated bracelet, but it's like under the radar, right? It's not astronomically priced.
Yeah.
And I've still, to this day, never seen anybody else wearing that watch.
The day I saw it on your wrist, I was like, I love that. I kind of need that. That's,
you know,
that's
that
beautiful.
Rice bead bracelet.
Yeah.
It's just, I feel like it's an homage to like the classic watchmaking.
Yeah.
You know,
I love
dress
that.
watch, but it's also kind of sporty.
So how much, when you think about your division in the collection, is there a brand that you have more of? Are you more of a Rolex guy, more of an AP guy? Obviously, you had a lot of Omegas in the past.
I did have a lot of Omegas in the past, and, you know, sadly, that's dwindled down. You know, I caught a resentment. You know, when the Snoopy came out, I have an Omega tattoo on my arm. You know?
Oh, yeah, I see it right here.
You know, and that Snoopy came out, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it was, and I didn't get an allocation for it. I got a little resentful. And I said, you know what? I'm going to Rolex.
Yeah.
And I went down the Rolex hole pretty deep. And then at the same time, you know, I was lucky enough to be able to purchase some APs in the boutique. And then Patek in Miami started being nice to me. And, you know, it's like, so now it's pretty spread out. You know, and now I'm buying some independents too. I got that Zentier, that jump hour watch, which is pretty cool.
I like independence, man. I love Rolex, and I'm waiting for my Le Mans rose gold, okay?
Yeah.
Because if not, I'm gonna start getting some kind of feelings, okay, when I'm promised a watch and not delivered.
Yeah.
So, you know who I'm talking about. I see you. You're my AD, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm waiting for that one. AP, honestly, I love AP. I'm a huge fan of vintage AP. I haven't found something that, like, I'm just like, I have to get. So I haven't made the phone calls for any AP in a while. Even though that Malachi dial that Bad Bunny wore on the Super Bowl was, it's kind of down the route of what I like.
Yeah.
And Patek, man, I have an amazing relationship with Patek across kind of multiple ADs. But same, I haven't found one that just kind of like has spoken to me right now that really says to me. And so I've now gone down the route of independence. I'm like all in on Jorn.
Yeah, you're
I'm
a Moser guy.
All in on Moser. I'm starting to get feelings about a couple of things on those too, but we're going
I want to be a Jordan guy. I don't understand what's going on here.
We all want to be
I'm
Jordan
hanging out with
guys.
these guys, you know.
They make great watches, and honestly, I do like the way that they build the community. I mean, you still got to wait for the watches, but I do like the fact that they. It's not just like, wait, I'll call you whenever it comes. Good luck, you're never gonna get it. It's like, wait, but hey, come join our community. Come be at our events. Come be part of everything. And you might still not get it.
I mean, that's
but
been
at least
I
you
think
got
that's
friends.
been the biggest problem with Jordan is they invite me, which is I'm grateful to be invited, but I'm busy, man. I'm running a community business, and it's like I can't just be hanging out smoking cigars all day. Unfortunately, you know.
I say that. Shout out to CJ, who's not here with us. He's in Paris. He's the guy you were talking about who does cigars all day. I unfortunately can't do that either. But let's talk about this community business, because it's something that we have here, a beautiful collaboration bag. This is our first batch, right?
Yeah.
So we did our beautiful Brew Cup Imperial Moto 0 to 60. But before we get into this, why coffee?
You know, sobriety, actually. You know, when I sold my company in 2015, I was just getting sober. I was drinking a lot of coffee, and I was hanging out at Panther Coffee a lot. And actually, Joel over at Panther was sort of our first partner when we opened this Little River location. You know, he put our staff through all the training. You know, we used his coffee for a number of years, and then you know, we sort of outgrew him for one reason or another. But yeah, coffee was this thing that just brought community together. And I was drinking a lot of coffee newly in sobriety, and the more I drank and the more I learned about it, the more I wanted to have a better product. I visited with coffee farmers and roasters, and I know the process from forward to back, and I know what makes good coffee, and I know it makes bad coffee, and there's a lot of bad coffee.
I think for us, it was an idea of bringing community together, which is why I love that we are having this podcast, because, you know, I think in adulthood happens very much like in high school.
Yes.
And we've had these conversations before, because it happens in not only kind of this idea of the community of coffee, but the community of Porsche and the community of watches. And I've seen these communities get separated, these human beings who could be friends and could enjoy the hobby kind of get separated. which is really interesting because you would think at our age, at this point, you know, you would be a little bit more immune to the BS, but it was happening in the watch world. I was seeing people leaving the watch club and like just over things that make no sense, and I won't, you know, mention any of those, but same thing in the Porsche community and like people like splitting up groups and doing too much. And my theory, and maybe it's because I come from music, and in music, the only way you win is collaborating. Yes, you can have more hits than me. Yes, we might both be going after the same artist with the same song, and sometimes our songs are competing. But there's no way I am going to make a successful career if I don't work with you. Right? Like Dr. Luke worked with Max Martin, and Max Martin need a Shellback. If Timbo doesn't work with Danger Hands, he doesn't have Justin Timberlake. Like, you kind of have this idea of Christian. And I still remember back when, you remember that battle? Because it reminded me, because we're such a Miami thing. Remember that battle of Scott Storch against Timbo?
Oh, totally.
And like they were making diss songs, and you know, Justin Timberlake even got on the diss song and called "You're Just a Piano Man."
Yeah.
Like it's so interesting because imagine what the piano of Scott Storch would have done with the rhythmic section of Timbaland. Oh my God, that would have been insane. Like the melody that Scott Storch would do with the drums. And so for me, it's about collaboration, and I'm excited that we're collaborating.
Yeah, I am too. You know, like when I first met you, I think everyone assumed that you were my nemesis, you know? And I said, he wants to open a coffee shop. I opened a, why would I be mad if somebody wanted to open a coffee shop? I think it's the greatest thing. Go for it. It's like, and I think even people in the community have assumed that you and I were against each other, and they would put us at odds with each other. And that's why I love that we're sitting here talking right now too, because I think it's important to show the folks in the community that want drama, there is no drama. The only thing drama breeds is confusion and indecisiveness. And yeah, this is exciting, man. This is so cool what you built here, you know.
Hey, this is a little tease of all the things we're going to get to do. But we've gotten to the point of the show where we call the hot seat. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Are you going to survive?
I think so.
Rolex or Omega?
Rolex.
Rolex or AP?
AP.
Porsche or Land Rover?
Porsche.
Cars or bikes?
Oh, shit.
Cars
Both.
or bike? Can't choose both. Cars or bikes?
Bikes.
Bikes or watches?
Watches. Damn it.
Cappuccino or latte?
Cappuccino.
You survived the hot seat. Brother, thank you for being part of this show. Let the people know where they can find you.
You know, imperialmoto.com. Real McKenna is my Instagram. We're in Little River, Oakland Park, Aventura Mall, and we're building a sick facility a block from here called Revolt.
Where I'm going to have a place because he gave it to me at discount, 99% discount.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
paying all but 1%. Make sure you check out his music, Maddie Love. I'm your host, Lex Borrero. This is 0 to 60 on time. By the way, we now have this beautiful G-Shock collaboration with BBC available at 0to60brand.com. And you can find out more information about the MIA Watch Club at miawatchclub.com. This has been an incredible show, Matt. Thank you for being part of this. Until next time, peace.